Why do Catholics have to go to Mass every Sunday? And when can Catholics be excused from going to Sunday Mass? And where does the Sunday obligation come from in the Bible? Right? These are all questions that maybe you've had over the course of your life. I know I've had them. And in this presentation, what I want to do is answer these questions by starting with what the Catholic Church, the official catechism of the Catholic Church, actually teaches about the Sunday obligation, and then showing you where it comes from in Scripture and in church tradition. So I'm going to begin with this quote from the official catechism of the Catholic Church on the Sunday obligation. And this is what it says about our obligation to go to Sunday Mass. Quote, "The Sunday Eucharist is the foundation and confirmation of all Christian practice. For this reason, the faithful are obliged to participate in the Eucharist on days of obligation, unless excused for a serious reason. For example, illness, the care of infants, or dispensed by their own pastor. Those who deliberately fail in this obligation commit a grave sin." End quote. Okay, there's a lot there that we want to unpack. First, notice that it says that Sunday Mass is the foundation of all Christian practice, of our whole lives as Christians. Right? Second, notice it uses the language of obligation to describe how important our participation in the Eucharist every week is. And this is actually helpful for us if you're from the South, right? If someone says much obliged to you, what do they mean? They mean, I'm in debt to you, right? I'm indebted to you. So what exactly is the nature of our debt to God that we pay when we worship Him every week? Another aspect of the passage that stands out to me is the section about missing Mass. Did you catch that? It says that anyone who deliberately fails to fulfill their Sunday obligation commits a grave sin. Now, how can it be a grave sin just to miss Mass on Sunday? I'll never forget the first time I read this paragraph from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I was actually in college at the time, right? And I was interested in my faith, but like a lot of college students, I had, started skipping Sunday Mass every now and then. But I was still interested enough to be reading the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And when I got to this paragraph, I remember thinking, that is so lame, right? Just to get people to go to church, they got to make it a grave sin, right? That's how badly they need you to come into church. So I reacted against it rather than listening to it, right? And kind of trying to receive it because, frankly, deep down, I felt guilty that I had been skipping Mass and I wasn't going to Mass like my parents had brought me up to do. So how can the church teach that? How can it be a grave sin to deliberately miss Mass? And also, if it's so important for us to go to Mass every single Sunday, what about being dispensed from it or excused from it? If it's so important, how can we be excused or dispensed from the Sunday obligation under certain conditions? What are those conditions? And one reason this is an important question is because in the spring of the year 2020, as you all know, right, the coronavirus pandemic broke out and something unprecedented happened in the whole history of the church. The Vatican in Rome and then Catholic bishops throughout the world lifted the obligation to attend Sunday Mass, right, so that people did not have to go to the Eucharist because of what was taking place with the coronavirus, right? And because of the dangers that it posed to their flocks in different countries throughout the world. Now, this had never happened before. I'll never forget when I saw the news that the Vatican wasn't going to have Easter services for Holy Week, right? This is an unprecedented event. And it raised the question for a lot of people. Hold on, how can the Pope or the bishops, how do they have the authority to lift the obligation for Sunday Mass when it's So important. I've been taught my whole life I have to go to Mass every Sunday, right? So in our current context, now that we're in 2021, a number of bishops throughout the country and throughout the world are beginning to reinstate that Sunday obligation. And so this raises a really important pastoral question for Christians everywhere, for Catholics. Why do we have the Sunday obligation? Where does it come from? And why is it important to our lives of faith? That's what we're going to look at in this presentation. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at three key topics. First, we're going to look at Sabbath rest in the Old Testament. I love the Old Testament, so we've got to go back to the beginnings of the Bible to really understand it. Second, we're going to look at Sunday worship in the New Testament and how the early church celebrated the Lord's Supper, or the Eucharist, as it was later called. And then third and finally, we're going to end with the Sunday obligation today. What does the church teach today about the Sunday obligation, and how can we live that out in our lives of faith as Catholics, all right? So that's the basic plan for this presentation. So let's just dive right in and start with the first topic, and that is Sabbath rest in the Old Testament. If we're going to understand the Sunday obligation, we have to begin not with the Catechism, not even with the New Testament, but with the Old Testament. We have to go back to the Bible and to its beginnings. And when we do, we can answer the question, where does the Sunday obligation come from in Scripture? All right, so in order to see that, let's begin with the key passage here from the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. It is the famous commandment to keep the Sabbath holy in the 10 Commandments. And here's the text for you. It's right here on your outline in Exodus chapter 20. It says this, quote, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your manservant or your maidservant or your cattle," so even the cows get a day off, right? "Or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." All right, end quote. That's from Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. And the words that I just read to you, these are the words of the Lord that he is giving to Israel when they've come to Mount Sinai and they've made the covenant with him in the desert, right? And he's going to give them the law about how they are to live in relationship with him. And he gives them these 10 commandments. Now, every Christian knows that the 10 commandments are very, very important, right? The Old Testament tells us that the 10 commandments were written on 2 tablets. And unlike all the other laws and all the other words of the Old Testament, these 10 commandments, these 2 tablets, Exodus 31 verse 18 says, are written with the finger of God. Right? So if you have any doubt about how important they are, just keep that in mind. These are written with the finger of God. They're very, very sacred, very important. And in this commandment about the Sabbath day, God gives Israel 2 basic commandments. First, he says that you're to keep the Sabbath holy. Keep it holy. Right? Now, what does the word holy mean? Now, in our day, it kind of has a negative connotation. Like a lot of people, when they hear the word holy, they think, oh, well, that's somebody who's, really, really, really good and a little uptight, right? That's what people think. Okay, it's true, right? But in the Bible, that's not what the word holy means. The word holy literally means set apart. Kadosh is the Hebrew word. And it has 2 meanings. It means set apart from sin and set apart for God. So the Sabbath day, out of the 7 days in the week, there's this one day that's set apart for God. It's sacred, right? It's holy. It belongs to him in a special way. All right, that's the first part. The second part, though, is the commandment to rest. You'll notice that God says you shall not do any work on the Sabbath. And he's really clear about just how broad that command is. Not only you won't do any work, but your children, you can't make your kids work on I said Sunday, I'll come back. This is Sabbath. Hold on, we'll get there in a minute. Can't make the kids work on Sabbath, or any of your employees, or even the animals. They should get to rest too, once a week, right? And the reason that Exodus 20, that the 10 Commandments give for this, is in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth. So if you go back to the book of Genesis chapter 1, God creates the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he blesses it, he hallows it, he makes it holy, set apart, and he rests. Okay? So Sabbath rest is an imitation of God. So if God rests on the seventh day, God's people, the people of Israel, are also going to rest from their labors every seventh day. Right? Now, you might think, well, why? There's so much that we could go into in terms of the theology of that. But just a basic point. One of the great temptations of human life and human labor is to make our work into an idol, right? To make our lives all about work, all about what we do, what we can accomplish in this world. But God gives the commandment to Israel to help them realize that this life and our labor in this world, although it's good, right? He makes Adam, puts him in the garden to work, is not what we're ultimately made for, right? There's an eternal rest in God that we're ultimately destined for. So the Sabbath helps us to keep in mind not to make an idol out of our work and to set apart time for our ultimate destiny, who is God, right? To keep that day holy. Right? Final, and this is really important, if you look at the tablets of the Ten Commandments, this is really the heart of it. You'll notice as you walk through them that God in the first set, he gives 3 commandments regarding love of God, and then the second set of commandments is regarding love of neighbor. The commandments are really all about love. They're not just rules. They are about how to love God rightly and how to love our neighbor rightly. And Exodus chapter 20, verse 6 actually says that when God says that those who love me keep my commandments. See, we tend to think of the commandments as like rules that are imposed on us, but they're actually a formula, a pattern, a way of life for learning how to love God rightly and how to love our neighbors. And so what God's teaching Israel is this: if you really love God, then you'll want to spend time with him, at least once a week. Right? I mean, think about it. If you're married, for example, if your spouse said to you, I love you, honey, but I really don't want to spend any time with you. Or, I love you, but let's not spend more than an hour a week together. Is that going to fly, right? Does that person do you really love somebody if you want to give them the bare minimum of your time? Well, no, we all know that. So God knows that if he's going to teach his people how to love them, he also has to teach them how to set apart time for him, how to make a certain day of the week sacred, 1 out of the 7. All right, so that's the Old Testament roots of resting 1 day out of 7. Fast forward to the New Testament. Another important reason that we honor the Lord and rest every 7 days is, this is important, because Jesus did it, right? Remember, Jesus of Nazareth was a Jew. Although he was the Son of God made man, he was also a practicing Jew. And the New Testament tells us that Jesus honored the Sabbath, that he went to synagogue every Sabbath and kept it holy. So, for example, in Luke chapter 4, verse 16, we read these words, "And Jesus came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and he went to the synagogue as his custom was on the Sabbath day." Now, you might be thinking, well, hold on a second. I thought Jesus did some things on the Sabbath that caused people to be, upset with him. And that is true, right? So there are certain exceptions to Sabbath rest that Jesus himself had to make sure his disciples understood. For example, healings. If you read the Gospels, you'll see on several occasions Jesus casts out demons or he heals people on the Sabbath. Another exception would be works of charity or good works, right? So Jesus allows his disciples to feed themselves by plucking heads of grain on the Sabbath. And he even uses the example of saving the life of an animal if it's fallen into a pit. He says, which one of you wouldn't pull it out of the pit? That would be a good work. You wouldn't be violating the Sabbath if you did that. And the reason that he gives for those exceptions is very important. He says, quote, that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It's Mark chapter 2, verse 28, right? In other words, the reason the Israelites were commanded by God to rest every week and to worship him, to keep it holy, is not because God needs it, but because we need it, right? We need it. And even more, Jesus also says that he has the authority over the Sabbath. He actually says the Son of Man, which is the way he refers to himself, is the Lord of the Sabbath. Now, in a first century Jewish context, that would have been a staggering claim on his part, because any Jew would have known that the Lord of the Sabbath, according to the Old Testament, is God. And yet Jesus commands and declares that he has a divine authority over the Sabbath. So the Catechism makes clear for us in paragraph 2173 that although the Gospels report many incidents that Jesus was accused of violating the Sabbath, he never actually fails to respect the holiness of the day. Right? He keeps the Sabbath, right? But he does have these exceptions that flow from charity and from his divine authority. Now, one last point here. This is important. It's interesting. If you look at the life of Jesus, he led the life of a faithful Jew. He followed the law. So he would have gone to synagogue and kept the Sabbath holy every single week. But what's fascinating is even at the end of his life and his passion and death, he honored the Sabbath. I don't know if you ever thought about this, but what day does Jesus die on? He dies on Good Friday. And although we sometimes forget it, any Jew can tell you that the Sabbath begins on Friday at sunset. A lot of Christians think, oh, Sabbath and Sunday are the same. No. The Sabbath is Saturday. And in the Old Testament, each day will begin not with 12 o'clock midnight, but with the sunset in the evening. Okay? So Sabbath actually would begin on Friday night at sunset, and then it ends at sunset on Saturday night. So Jesus dies Friday afternoon, and they put his body in the tomb, right, before sunset. And then what does he do from Friday all the way through Sabbath? He rests. Right? Even in death, he honors the Sabbath. And then, this is going to be the reason why the women have to wait till dawn on Sunday to go and find his body and to find the tomb raised. Okay? So as we'll get there in just a second. So Jesus rests in the sleep of death, honors the Sabbath even in his passion, death, and resurrection. And that's how holy, that's how sacred this day is. So here's my question for you. If Jesus needed to go to synagogue every week, if Jesus kept every seventh day holy, then what do we need to do? If in his humanity he practiced that, then what should we do every week? We should imitate Christ, right? That's what a Christian is. We're all little Christs, right? We're supposed to imitate Jesus. And he kept the Sabbath holy. All right. Now, with that said, though, you might be thinking, well, hold on, Dr. Pitre. You just said Sabbath was Saturday, but we, as Catholics, as Christians, we keep Sunday holy. So when did that shift occur? Well, turn the page.